you will be making your way in your Bibles over to 1 Kings chapter 3. 1 Kings chapter 3, of course, we've been studying on Wednesday nights, kind of a curriculum that will hopefully in a number of years make us or get us through the entire Bible. And last week we looked at the concept or the idea of Solomon establishing his kingdom. David, of course, dies. Solomon is appointed as the next king of Israel. And David had Solomon do some things that would help set up the kingdom of Israel for success. And of course, as we studied last week, you know, while David was king of Israel, there's a lot of turmoil that existed within the kingdom. And undoubtedly, he wanted his son, didn't want his son to have to go through those very same things. And so he kind of gave him some advice, some tips to help set that kingdom up for success. And Solomon, as we're studying here in 1 Kings chapter 3, we talked also last week about the idea that Solomon wasn't the case that he was an unknowledgeable man from the beginning. He was a very wise individual before God grants him a very special gift. But undoubtedly, what we're going to read about tonight is Solomon asking for this great wisdom for which he is so famous in God's Word. So let's go to 1 Kings chapter 3. I think we've got all the papers handed out now. And if I can, let's get somebody to read the first 3 verses there for us.
Now Solomon made a treaty with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. He married Pharaoh's daughter, and he brought her to the city of David, until he had finished building his own house, the house of the Lord, and the wall all around Jerusalem. Meanwhile, the priests were sacrificed at the high places, because there was no house built for the name of the Lord in the old days. Solomon loved the Lord, walking these statutes of his father David, except that he sacrificed, burning incense at the high places.
Okay, if you look on your sheet, we've got a number of questions there, beginning with number 1. The question is, what were some of the divine rules that Solomon broke as a king and as an Israelite? And you could probably name some more, but let's just try to stick the first 3 verses here.
Married a foreigner.
Yeah, the first one that we read about, of course, is his marriage to who? Pharaoh's daughter. And, you know, there's been some discussion over the years. Some people believe that Pharaoh's daughter was a proselyte. She actually converted to Judaism. You won't find that anywhere in the Bible. But it is a fact that God, this is one of the many marriages of Solomon that God disapproved of. And part of the reason we know that is later on in the book of 1 Kings. Turn over real quickly with me to 1 Kings chapter 11. In 1 Kings chapter 11, beginning in verse 1, it says, "But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites, of the nations concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, Ye shall not go into them, neither shall they come in unto you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clave unto these in love." You know, it's mentioned again a number of women here that Solomon loves, strange women. And of course, one of them was who? Yeah, Pharaoh's daughter. She's specifically mentioned within that group. And then in verse 2, he goes on to say, of the nations concerning which God told them not to intermarry with these people. And so part of the rules or divine rules that Solomon broke, or at least one of them, was the marrying of foreign women. What else do we read about here? Yeah. In verse 3, it talks about how he loved the Lord, how he walked in the statutes of his father David, but he sacrificed and offered burnt offerings in high places. Now, what's the significance of that? Okay, some people think it is the worship of other gods. There's a couple of interesting perspectives I think that you could take, in both of these in line with biblical thinking. The first one is the idea of the sacrificing to these other gods. The second one is simply sacrificing in an undesignated divine place. Part of the worship of the children of Israel at this time revolved around what physical structure? Yeah, it was the tabernacle. The temple hadn't been built yet. That's what Solomon's going to do later on. But it revolved around the tabernacle. And what have we learned about the tabernacle in studying through the Old Testament? Okay, sometimes it was in a high place.
No. Inside it, there was a higher holy place.
Okay, yeah, there's a most holy place. What else? Did it stay in any one particular place? No. There are at least 3 or 4 different places that we read of in the Old Testament where it was moved and worship was stationed at that place. Now, what's interesting about this, well, maybe I'll just hold on to that and we'll talk about it here in just a few moments. But if you go back to Deuteronomy chapter 12, turn back there with me real quickly here and let's read a couple verses. And I kind of lean more toward the idea that Solomon is not necessarily worshiping idols here, but he's worshiping God in an undesignated place. And if you notice in Deuteronomy 12, a few verses here, beginning in verse 2, these were the instruction that were given to the children of Israel whenever they went in and conquered the land of Canaan. But in verse 2 he says, Ye shall utterly destroy all the places wherein the nations which ye shall possess serve their gods, upon the high mountains and upon the hills and and under every green tree. And ye shall overthrow their altars and break their pillars and burn their groves with fire. And ye shall hew down the graven images of their gods and destroy the names of them out of that place. Ye shall not do so unto the Lord your God, but unto the place which the Lord your God shall choose out of all your tribes to put his name there, even unto his habitation shall ye seek, and thither shalt you come. And thither shalt ye bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices and your tithes and heave offerings and your hand and your vows and your freewill offerings and the firstlings of your herds and of your flocks. And notice in verse 13 here, Take heed to thyself that thou offer not thy burnt offerings in every place that thou seest. So God told them basically, his instructions were whenever you conquer this land, just destroy any of these places that the children of Israel have set up. Obviously, did Israel do that? No. And so I think what happened, a lot of times they use these high places not necessarily to worship other gods, but to worship Jehovah God. And if you notice, what he talks about there is, be sure you offer your burnt offerings and your sacrifices in the place that I designate. Don't just go out here and start offering burnt offerings and sacrifices any old place that you want. And so Solomon, even when he, as we're going to read here a little later on, even when he is granted this request by God, where is it? Does anybody know? Look forward just a little bit here. Look at verse 4. Yeah, and what was that place? It was a great high place, wasn't it? This is where Solomon offers 1,000 burnt offerings. And it's hard for me to fathom that he goes up there to offer 1,000 burnt offerings to an idol, and then God appears unto him and he's happy. I think what was happening is they were using these high places, which had been built and designed by the pagans from whom they took this land, to offer their burnt offerings and their sacrifices. But that wasn't the place where God told them to do it. And so part of their downfall, the children of Israel, was using the undesignated place that God had warned about.
At some point he did.
Yeah, there's no doubt, is there?
In 1 Kings 11, 5 through 8, it mentions Ashtaroth and Jonan and Chemosh and Molech. Didn't Molech, isn't that where he sacrificed their
Children, yeah.
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 It mentions all of those that he worshiped.
Yeah, and And from that chapter too, the emphasis is, why did he do that? It was because of the women he married, right? That was what they wanted to do, and they swayed him away from God and caused him to do that. So yeah, you're correct. Undoubtedly in the Bible, there's plain black and white statements where I think it was later on in his life where Solomon did turn to idolatrous worship after he married all these other women. But I think what we're reading about here is, again, this idea of still worshiping God, but not worshiping him in the designated place that had been given, using these high places that God told the children of Israel to destroy whenever they conquered the land of Israel. So anybody else have any comments or questions?
Once they carried the tabernacle in, did they set it in one place and it stayed there until David moved it?
Yeah, well, we read, eventually the Ark of the Covenant stopped at, slipped my mind. Who's threshing floor? Somebody help me out here.
Shiloh was that, did it stay in Shiloh until David moved it?
Until David did? Well, remember it was captured by the Philistines.
Not the Ark of the Covenant, tabernacle.
Yeah,
Stayed in
well,
Shiloh.
I think, that's an interesting question because you don't really read a whole lot about it.
No, well, they didn't do it. You had what ones you broke, heavens, you broke them all because it wasn't.
Yeah, in 2 Chronicles 3, let's see here. In verse 1, notice this. It says, "Then Solomon began to build the house of the Lord at Jerusalem in Mount Moriah, where the Lord appeared unto David his father, in the place that David had prepared, in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite." And so, remember the Ark of the Covenant stayed there in that threshing floor, and eventually, like we studied, that was going to be the place where the temple was going to be built. So, what happened to the tabernacle? I think whenever the Philistines came and took the ark away, I think they took a lot of things. I think they probably even destroyed the tabernacle itself at that point in time. So there's not a whole lot of information, that's given from that point of time then to the construction of the temple. Okay, anybody else? All right, let's go to question number 2. The question is, so how did Solomon show that he loved God? Well, did he love God? Let's ask that.
He walked in the statutes of his father David, except.
Yes. So what does that mean? What's the lesson for us there? Yeah. What is our love for God based upon? Yeah, keeping his commandments, right? Solomon loved the Lord because he walked in the statutes of his father, or in the statutes of the Lord, and followed the statutes of his father David. Was he perfect? Did he keep all the commandments of God? No. There were certainly some things that he fell short on. But remember that Jesus made the statement in John 14:15. He said, "If you love me, we'll do what? I will keep his commandments," right? And so my love for God, you can tell how much a person loves God based upon what? Yeah, their actions. Are they keeping the commandments of God? So for the most part, Solomon wasn't he? But he wasn't perfect. There were some things in his life that he didn't follow God in. And so obviously, lesson for us is we need to have complete love for God, not hold back in certain areas, but try to do everything that the Lord asks us to do. Okay, let's go back to 1 Kings chapter 3 and read a pretty good section here. Somebody read verses 4 through 15 for us.
And the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was a great high place. 1,000 burnt offerings did Solomon offer upon that altar. In Gibeon the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night. servant is in the midst of thy people, which thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered nor counted for multitude. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy God, thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this, they so great a people? And the speech pleased the Lord, that Solomon had asked this thing. And God said unto him, Because thou hast asked this thing, and hast not asked for thyself long life, neither hast thou asked for riches for thyself, nor hast asked for the life of thine enemies, but hast asked for thyself understanding to discern judgment. Behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and an understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise like unto thee. And I have also given thee that which thou hast not asked, both riches and honor, so that there should not be any among the kings like thee unto thee all thy days. And if thou wilt walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commands, as thy father David did walk, then I will lengthen thy days. And Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And it came to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered up burnt offerings and offered peace offerings, and made a feast to all his servants.
Okay, so a couple of things here. First of all, in verse 4, the king goes to Gibeon there to sacrifice these offerings. And, what was so impressive about the offering that Solomon gave there?
The amount.
Yeah, how many did he offer? 1,000. Can you imagine that? I mean, can you imagine, here comes a guy in the distance marching with 1,000 animals, and he brings them to the priest, and he says, hey, all these are burnt offerings for God. I don't know how long it took him to offer all of them, but it's a very impressive number that you read about.
Was it a mixture of animals? Was it sheep?
I don't, does it say? It doesn't really say, does it? Yeah, he just says brought 1,000 burnt offerings. So maybe, I don't know, there may be some more information on that in Chronicles. There's a couple parallels there, but I haven't read it, so I don't know right offhand. So he goes there, he offers this great offering, and what happens?
What shall I give thee?
Yeah, God appears to Solomon in a dream, and he asks him the question. He says, what do you want me to give you? So obviously, is God pleased with the offering?
Yes.
Yeah, God acknowledges the fact, and that's kind of why I said what I did before. It's hard for me to imagine he goes to Gibeon to offer 1,000 burnt offerings to an idol, and God appears to him in a dream and says, what do you want me to give you? But it seems like these are directed toward God. We did read, let's see there, what verse was that? We did read in verse 15 that the Ark of the Covenant is in Jerusalem now, right? What else is interesting? This is where I was wanting to go before, and I got the dyslexic here. I got the numbers mixed up. But 2 Chronicles 1 and verse 3, it says, So Solomon and all the congregation went to the high place that was at Gibeon, for there was the tabernacle of the congregation of God, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, had made in the wilderness. So the tabernacle was set up there. I don't think it was set up in this high place, but it was set up in Gibeon. And so Solomon goes there initially. This is where he offers the 1,000 burnt offerings. And then he goes back to Jerusalem, to where the Ark of the Covenant is, to basically offer some more sacrifices to God, peace offerings, thanksgiving offerings, things like that. And so, pretty obvious that the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle aren't in the same place, are they? They're in two separate places at this time. But the tabernacle was located in this city. Again, I just don't think it was located on the high place, or if it was, evidently God hadn't designated for it to be put there. It was something that was done by the whim of men and not the commandments of God. Question number 4 here. So, for what purpose did Solomon ask God to grant his request? What did he ask God for?
Understanding heart.
Yeah, an understanding heart, and for what purpose?
Judge thy people.
Yeah, a couple of things that he says there, right? He says, verse 9, give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this, thy so great a people? And so he asked for an understanding in order for the purpose of ruling over this great and this mighty nation. Now, keep in mind, this is a very special nation, right? This is a very special people, a very great people, because they're God's chosen people. And here is Solomon. Solomon is appointed as king over this great nation, these special people. And so Solomon said, that's a tremendous responsibility. You know, what I need or what I want is an understanding heart so I can rule over these people. He also points out something about himself. What does he say about himself? Go back to verse 7.
He said he was but a child.
Yeah, he said, I'm but a child. What does that mean? Was he talking about his age?
Immature.
Okay, in what sense?
Knowledge of rules.
Yeah, he was a beginner when it came to being a king, wasn't he? I mean, he was a novice. And so to be put into this position, such a great position, you know, and be given such a great responsibility, and here you are, you're just a beginner. You know, Solomon said, I'm like a kid, doesn't know in or out. And so what I need is an understanding heart. What I need is to be able to discern so that I can judge and rule over this great and this mighty people that you have chosen. So how would you classify this request that Solomon made?
It's very pleasing to God.
Yeah, but why? I mean, why was God so pleased with this?
Because he didn't ask for anything for himself.
Yeah, it was a selfless request, wasn't it? You know, God appears to him and he says, what can I give you? And Solomon doesn't ask anything for himself, right? In the greater picture of things, he's thinking about God's people. He's thinking about everybody else. And so what he asked for was not for his personal gain or personal blessing, but in order to be able to rule over and to direct this and guide these people like God wanted them to go. And so he is a tremendously, you see a lot of humility in the request here that he puts before him. And why is that important? You know, when you think about governing a nation, when you think about a person who's going to rule over a nation, why is it so important to be humble?
You realize he was on the higher power.
Yeah. When a person steps into a position of power as a ruler of a nation, is it all about them? It's about the nation, isn't it? It's about the people that they're going to be seeing or overseeing, that they're going to be governing, that they're going to be ruling. And so Solomon understood that from the beginning. You know, this idea to be a king, it wasn't an opportunity for him, you know, to gain all this power and prestige and whatever he wants, but it was an opportunity to better God's people. And so he's very, again, he's just starting out here. He understands the difficulty of the task that lies before him, and he understands that he needs help if he's going to be an effective ruler over Israel. So part of the things that you read about in these kings of Israel is from time to time cases would be brought before them, difficult cases, and they had to make a judgment in those cases. And so thinking about that quality, question number 6 here on our sheet is, if you had to stand trial, what qualities would you value most in a judge? What would you want? What characteristics would you want the judge that's ruling on your case or overseeing your case to have?
I want to be fair.
Okay, you want him to have equality, right? not favor the rich, not favor the poor, not favor male or female. You know, treat everybody with equality. What else?
Dismiss the case.
That's not equality there, Danny. What else would you want him to have?
Knowledge.
Yeah, would you want him to know what the law is? Yeah, right. If you're going to go before him and you're being judged by the law, you want that guy to know what the law says or doesn't say, right? Or what it allows for or what it doesn't allow for. So knowledge, what else?
What would be experienced?
Okay, experience, yeah. Logical, okay. That's a good one. What else? Any others come to mind?
Consider extenuating circumstances.
So make exceptions? Is that what you're saying?
Don't go there.
You need to go sit by Danny there. This is the special crowd over here. You know, there's certain qualities that all of us would want in the person that we stand before. You know, honesty would certainly be one of them, right? You want them to deal fairly. We mentioned equality, wisdom or knowledge, and justice. I mean, you want a person who's going to do what's right. And so Solomon, you know, when you think of having your case brought before Solomon, what kind of judge would you think he'd be? He'd be all those things, wouldn't he? I mean, it would be a tremendous honor as a nation to have a person like that leading you and directing you and overseeing all your affairs. And so it was a blessing that God gave to Solomon personally, but it was also a blessing on a national level to all the different people. So how did God, number 7 here, feel about what Solomon had chosen to request? Danny answered that he was pleased because it was selfless. You know, he showed a sense of inadequacy, a lack of pride. All those things are always pleasing to God. And question 8 here, it says, given the opportunity to ask God for whatever you want from him, what sort of request would you expect from any ordinary human?
Physical.
Yeah, physical. And I'm like Steve. I think probably if God were to appear to every individual or to an individual today, let's just say 10 individuals, and say, I'll give you anything you want. Just ask me, what do you want? I would say probably number 1 on the list would be money, wouldn't you? What else would people ask for? Long life or health? Yeah, that would be a common, I think, request. What else would they ask for?
Well, we should ask for a heavenly home.
We should, yeah. I doubt most people would, but
That'd take care of all of it.
it would, wouldn't it? Yeah, that'd cover all the ones that we need covered. Think anybody would ask for revenge? Think they have some people in mind that they'd like God to take care of? I think all of those are just, on a human level, ordinary person, if God were to ask them that, those are the type of things that they would ask for. So it's, again, you think about what Solomon asked for, and he's way up here. He's way above everybody else. So question 9 here, why are riches and honor of less ultimate value than wisdom? Right? God tells him, you didn't ask for riches, you didn't ask for fame, and because you didn't ask for it, I'm going to give you these anyway. So how does wisdom outweigh those things? Or does it?
Well, if you don't have wisdom, you probably lose all of that.
Yeah, if you don't have the smarts to take care of what you got, then your money's going to disappear very quickly. Fame is something that can be taken away through irresponsible words and actions, right? Wisdom preserves that fame, or helps to preserve that fame. So ultimately, those things are less profitable than wisdom because they can be lost through irresponsibility. We're not going to read the rest of the chapter here, but I think all of us are probably familiar with the story of the two prostitutes whose case is brought before Solomon, where they both had a child and both slept in the same bed, and during the night, one of these women evidently rolled over on her child and killed that child, and she took her child and her dead child and replaced it with a live child. And when the other woman woke up in the morning, she looks and it's not her child. And so this case is brought before Solomon, and the question is, well, whose child is this? So Solomon does what? Remember the story? Yeah, he said, bring me a sword and we'll just finish this right here. We'll make it fair. We'll cut the child in half, give half to one woman, half to the other. And he did that because he knew that the mother of that child would rather see her child live, even if it was with somebody else, than to die. And so one of them said, okay, that sounds fair to me. The other one said, no, just let her keep him. And so Solomon knew through this great wisdom that was given to him by God that the child belongs to the woman who wanted the life of this child spared. And so what happened because of that in Israel? When Solomon made this great ruling, what was the reaction of Israel to that ruling? Yeah, they had tremendous respect for him. They weren't afraid of him, but they had tremendous respect for him because they knew that he had the wisdom of God. What was so amazing about this is Solomon was able to look at these two women and look past all the words that they spewed out and to look right at their hearts. And it's interesting, but how many times in the New Testament do you see Jesus do that? I mean, people will come to him and they'll say all these different things, and Jesus will just look at their heart and start a completely different conversation. But that was what was so afraid. That he was able to see past all these words and just see these people for who they were. And so they knew that the wisdom of God dwelt in Solomon. And that brought him great fame, didn't it? That story had to be the topic of conversation for the next couple of weeks around Israel when anybody was talking. So it brought him fame. It also eventually gave birth to his great wealth that we're going to study about. And all of this came about because God granted him a request, but Solomon had the humility and lack of pride to ask for wisdom instead of what any ordinary human being would ask for. So, good lesson for us. Anybody have we're out of time here, anybody have any thoughts or comments, questions or anything before we end? Yes, sir.
I was kind of wondering at that time, you suppose that they got the sword out, was getting ready to cut the child in half before the mother actually said, "Oh, give the other woman the child to save his life," or was it just strictly, well, this is my ruling, now, go forward and do what I've said?
I don't know. That'd be an interesting thing to know. I do know people surrounding Solomon would have had swords, though. And so if he turned to one and said, "Give me your sword," I imagine they would have drew it and given it to him as quickly as they could. But I don't know where he was, before the mother spoke up. But it was certainly a situation where, all the elements were present there.
I believe that he would kill that child.
Yeah.